Today's video is going to be a little different. I'll jump around a bit. You can watch just the parts that interest you if you're in a hurry. Section A, starting this test. This section shows the startup tests of the 1000 watts for 15 minutes at 87 kilohertz test. The data from this test will be compared with the results of the previous test, which heated about the same amount of steel for the same amount of time, but at much lower frequency of 43 kilohertz. It's about 5 minutes long. Section B. Can't wait for the final results? Jump ahead to compare both runs. Here I jump ahead so you don't have to watch the whole thing if you don't want to. I use several graphs to compare the 43 kilohertz run against the 87 kilohertz run. This part takes about 3.5 minutes. Section C, the main body of this test. This one has a little bit of drama towards the end, but you all probably know by now that I am not normally that kind of guy. This is the longest section of this video, about 18 minutes in length. Section D, changes and applications. Here I'll discuss things that I'll do differently in the future and my thoughts on practical applications for this device. This topic takes about 2 minutes. Today's video is primarily being shot to help me keep track of all the numbers as I test my system for a 15-minute run at as close to or a little over 20 amps as I can. Heating up exactly the same weight of steel that I heated up in my previous video, only running the system with a 6-turn coil, so it's going to be running at about 87 kilohertz without secondary capacitors. I'll start off by, as usual, turning on the cooling. Battery is at 12.7 volts. Fan is running. I'm going to be reading temperature today. Turn on the temperature meter. That reads the temperature of the MOSFETs. Okay, cooling is on. MOSFET temperature. Sensors in place. 19.5 degrees Celsius. 68 degrees seems to be about the average temperature. Okay, I am plugging in the radiator cooling fan. Plugging in the 48 volt power supply. Turning on my timer. Setting it for 1 hour, and I'm going to count backwards until I get down to 45 minutes. As soon as I begin power on, first thing I'm going to do is to make a quick check of frequency just to verify where I'm at. I have a starting off piece of steel in here which should get me a decent amount of current, but under 20 amps, and then I'll keep adding until it's maybe 22, 24. As the parts go above Curie, current will drop. I have a number of little slugs of steel that I'll continue to add to keep the temperature or the current up around 20 amps or more. Okay, here we go with the power. This is just a quick test. 19 amps. 87.72 kilohertz. Okay, that's all I need for there, so I'm going to turn this guy off, the frequency meter off. Oh, forgot to turn my voltmeter on. 48 volts out of the power supply. Start the timer, counting down from 1 hour, and power on. 19 amps. Remember, we have I think about 5 amps of idle current here. I think I read all the numbers to begin with. The current is down to 18. I'm going to try one of my slivers in here. 26 amps. That's too much. So 18 amps. A thinner sliver, 24 amps, and we're at 5901, 59, okay, 59, we're 1 minute into it, 21 amps dropping to 20, 19, 18 already. Temperature, thermocouple 577 Celsius. It's already glowing under that piece I just laid in there. MOSFET's 89 degrees. Board cool. Capacitors are warming up a little bit. Board is 85. All the way down to 14 amps. I'll add another little sliver here. 16. I'm going to break in here and give you kind of a summary of the two tests. I have 6 graphs and 2 other measures to explain. The current for these 2 runs was pretty close to the same for both tests, 21 versus 19.5 for the 87 kilohertz test most of the time. The voltage input I didn't graph because the power supply was stable between 47.6 and 47.7 all of the time during both of the tests. So this heating profile is for reference only since I only have the one test. Power in watts. We certainly do get 1000 watts out of the system at either frequency, don't we? You see somewhat different initial currents due to my work loading process. The slightly lower steady-state current later in the 87 kilohertz test is not related to the difference in frequency in my opinion. The idle current at 87 kilohertz is slightly less than it is at 43 kilohertz, 4.7 amps versus 5.5. This makes the net current delivered to the load, which is the work, almost identical for both frequencies. The onboard capacitors definitely got hotter at 87 kilohertz than they did at 43 kilohertz. Of course, I didn't have the extra capacitors for the 87 kilohertz test, so we can't look at them. Note that the temperature had not stabilized at the end of the 87 kilohertz run like it did at the end of the 43 kilohertz test. The fans that I am using are 95 millimeters by 25 millimeters thick, 12 volts at 0.3 amps. I think that a slightly larger size fan would keep the capacitor temperatures much cooler, although I haven't had any capacitors fail up to this point. MOSFET temperatures. There was practically no difference in temperature profile between the 2 test runs. I think this is extremely good news, but don't forget to add heatsink compound. Temperature of the PC board under the MOSFETs. The bottom of the PC board heated more slowly during the middle of the 87 kilohertz test than the 43 kilohertz test, but ended up at about the same temperature as for the 43 kilohertz run. Again, the temperatures had almost stabilized by the end. I forgot to measure the chokes this time, but I think the PC board under the MOSFET's temperature measurement, this one, is related to the chokes because of heat transfer from them to the heavy PC board traces. Cooling water and heat exchanger cooling air. Both water and air temperatures behaved about the same for both tests, except at the very end of the 87 kilohertz test, where the water started spot boiling due to the failed work coil insulation and because I had improperly connected the coil to the water pump, allowing air into the lines. Okay, 58, we're 2 minutes in, current 16 amps, 700 degrees Celsius on the heat. 91 degrees on the MOSFETs, 47.7 on the power supply voltage. 23 amps now at 5737. My little pile is starting to move to the side. I'm going to try to correct it, push it over without melting my solder here that I'm using. 20 amps, we're down to 20 amps again. 756 on the steel. Three minutes in, 20 amps right on the head. MOSFETs 97.5. Cooling water 78, cooling air 72. Current 16, put in another slug. $18. See what this does. 22. MOSFETs 101. Under the board about the same. Capacitors probably 110. Water 87, cooling air 75, steel 931, 47.7 volts at the power supply, 21 and almost 22 amps, and that was at 5 minutes in. Uh, 1011 degrees Celsius at about 7 minutes in. MOSFETs 101.7. Capacitors 120. Current back to 18. Power supply 47.7. Water 95. Air temperature 79. .8 minutes in.
18 amps. MOSFET's 111. Temperature 1052 Celsius. That's 19 amps. We're starting to stick out the top a little bit here. Now we're 8 minutes in. MOSFET's 111, temperature 1082, power supply 47.7, current right on 20, water 100, air temperature 82, and if I didn't say it, power supply 47.7. Current 19.5 amps. This is 9 minutes in. Current 19.5 amps. Water 104, air 84, power supply 47.7, MOSFET's 112. Temperature in here 1133. 19 amps. Okay. I'm going to put my last piece in that'll get my weight up to equal what it was the last time, which is 10 ounces and some. And now we're at 10 minutes in. MOSFET's 111.2 Celsius, that is. Temperature in here, 1156 degrees Celsius. Current right on 20, as I think I said. Power supply 47.6, 47.7, 1160 Celsius work, 112 MOSFETs. MOSFET heat sinks, that is, and the board's about the same. The capacitors are probably 125. That's kind of worries me a little bit, but anyway, that's where they are. And before, when I was running at the lower frequency, I had a second fan on there. That second fan may have actually been doing some more cooling on these capacitors. Right at 20 amps, maybe 19.8. That was at 11 minutes into the test. MOSFETs, 116 degrees. Temperature in there, 1173. Water 114, air 90 degrees, and this is at 12 minutes into the test. MOSFET's 118, 1180 Celsius. Power supply 47.7. Battery's 12.3 for all that matters. 19.5 amps. I don't have any more stuff to put in there, really. Maybe I can try laying this thing on there, this little piece of steel, but I'm not going to pull apart my insulation to do that, so let's see if I can get a little more current. And maybe give me another half amp by adding that. That's more weight than I had in the last test. But some of the last test stuff was just about sticking out the top too. So, but anyway, there we are, very, very close to 20 amps. 1186 in here. This is at 13 minutes. 1188 temperature. 118.1 MOSFETs, board about the same. Capacitors, probably close to 130. Power supply 47.7, water 118, cooling air on my new big blower cooling radiator is 92 degrees. Minutes into the test. 1194 Celsius temperature, 120.6 degrees on the MOSFETs. That's the hottest of the two heat sinks, and it's probably 4 or 5 degrees hotter than the forward one than the rear one. 19.5 amps, I think I'm going to call that close enough to 20. Water temperature 122, air temperature 94 degrees, power supply 47.7, battery that runs the pump and the cooling fan 12.3. "14 minutes into the test. MOSFETs, 120.6. That's the hottest one. Board's about the same. Capacitors, they are got to be about 135. They're just about too hot to hold your hands on. 137 maybe. Temperature in here, 1199 Celsius. 47.7 volts on the power supply, 123 on the water, 95 on the cooling fan, and 19.8 amps gross output. Just reached 1200 here, and we are now 16 minutes into the test. And maybe I'll let it run through the 16th minute and just see if we can squeeze one more degree. Okay. I think this is going to be about it. We are now 16 minutes into the test, 1201 degrees Celsius here, 47.7 on the power supply, 19.5, boy, almost 20 amps on the output, 120.6 on the hottest MOSFET, 137 I'm going to call it on the capacitors, 1202, 125 water, 97 air, and I just noticed that my water is bubbling here. So this is it. I'm going to shut her down. And I guess I'll take the numbers here real quick. And now it's 17 minutes into the test. 120.4 on the hot MOSFET, hottest. 1206, whoa. Off goes the power. We're starting to melt something in here. So the power is off, 47.7. So we got smoke. I think I finally cooked my insulation here. And this is the motor insulation, not the fiberglass. So it's no huge surprise that that happened. So now we know how much that motor insulating fiberglass can take. 1145, still got pretty good smoke coming out of here. MOSFETs are down to 116 already. Water's down to 107. Air down to 93. And we're, what'd that be? 17 minutes into the test. 18 minutes into the test. Actually, I think that insulation is on fire. It's black and it's getting blacker. So I'm going to start uncovering the insulation and just sort of get it out of there so we can minimize the smoke. Oh, that was almost burned my finger there. Okay. Okay, the water stopped bubbling. And we're now 20 minutes into the test. And indeed, I really did start to cook my insulation. So that was a good test, I guess. Now I know something I didn't know before. And for this test, just to remind myself, when I hooked up this coil, I got my pump leads reversed. So I was pumping out to the top and down to the bottom. So I may have had a few air bubbles that never did get totally cleared out. My mistake. In fact, I see the bubbles moving through there right now, a few of them, which tells me even though the system worked okay, I would have been better off if I'd have been pumping into the bottom of the coil, which would force the coil to fill up, and then overflow into the upper part of the radiator. So if there were any air bubbles, then they would be allowed to escape right up here into the expansion chamber. Okay, well, that's the test.
Process changes. In future operation, I will probably run the system at 43 kilohertz or at least with double capacitors because the capacitors run cooler that way. Secondly, I will try it with the 1-inch coil and double capacitors. Maybe I'll spread the coils out to increase their inductance to get a lower frequency. Third, make it easier to change work coils. Fourth, make the system into a dual setup. One board with a small diameter work coil and another having a larger work coil. The smaller coil would be used for fast initial heating of a bar while it is straight and compact. Then, once I have forged some shape into the bar, making it too big to fit into the small coil, I can still place the work into the larger coil for further heating and forging. This would be easy to do because all I need to duplicate is the board and maybe the cooling fan. I could even run the water in series through the work coils of both units since only one unit would be powered up at a time, and of course a hefty switch to shift the power supply from one board to the other. I should make up a simple linear 120 volt AC to 12 volt DC power supply so I don't need a car battery for the water pump and PC board cooling fan. First, I think I could use this device for blacksmithing of things from about 3/8 round and down. I could use it for small things like the little salt spoons that guys make from horseshoe nails, or use it for anything else that is made from horseshoe nails or small stuff like that. Second, I think I could use it for heat treating most chisels. Third, I think it could be used for annealing any work that will fit into it. Fourth, I think I could even add a programmable temperature profile device so I could anneal difficult to anneal alloys like S7. 5. Could a person harden and temper knife blades with it? Maybe even anneal and or reharden a knife blade while the handle is still on it? I'm sure you've got plenty of ideas yourselves. Thanks for watching.